Hello, everyone. Welcome to this course, and I thank you for your participation thus far. There are a plethora of strategies that we can talk about when it comes to adolescent students or elementary students or preschool students or adult students, especially those that have disabilities, that are on the margin, that are atypical. There is a realm of diversity within our student population. And so looking at this and considering this is so important when we're working with individuals and when we're working and we're trying to teach or convey some type of information. So what I would like to do today is give you an overview of some thoughts that I shared with a group of aspiring teachers who are just starting out their career. So I hope that in sharing this with you, if you are a new teacher, I hope that you'll find something valuable in today's presentation. And if you're a seasoned teacher or a teacher who is taking a professional development course, taking this for professional development, I hope that today's presentation will inspire you, will confirm some things that you already know, that you already knew, and or confirm the things that you or did I just say that? Did I just say confirm? Inspire you, confirm the things that you've already known, and I hope that you will maybe learn something new. There are things in this presentation that will connect to what we've discussed in this course in its asynchronous format. So there will be some tie-in, and there will also be a couple of thoughts that are not directly mentioned in the course. So I just want to share these very important thoughts with you. I'm going to share my screen, so I'm going to move slowly to make sure I do this right. Okay, so let's share. All right. Okay, I'm going to do this slideshow. Okay, so I'm just going to hit new share just to make sure. Okay. So I'm going to keep hitting new share just to make sure, because I've done presentations and recorded them and the wrong screen was showing. Okay, so you know that I'm Dr. Michelle Chamblin, Professor Chamblin from Mobile University. And the first thing I want to ask you, inclusive practices. So inclusive practices are things that teachers do in the classroom to ensure that every student achieves the grade level standard. Yes, no, or maybe. So we're starting off with inclusive practices because a core belief is that with all the strategies that we do and everything we talk about, perhaps the greatest one is setting up an inclusive environment so that students can thrive. So this presentation basically discuss inclusive practices and what we as teachers and educational leaders can do. So we cannot always predict or be responsible for the behaviors of our students, of our parents, of our community stakeholders, but we can focus on ourselves. And so we can work towards setting up inclusive environments. So do you say yes, no, or maybe to this definition? We'll see as we go through this presentation if we circle back on this. So write it down, yes, no, maybe. And then brainstorm. I want you to write down at least 3 things about inclusive practices that are concerning for you, that may be troubling, something that you might want to know more about, or how you define it personally. So brainstorm. Just write down 3 things about inclusive practices or inclusive environments. And let's see if after this presentation, I've connected to those things. And if not, you can always email me and say, hey, Dr. Chamberlain, you know what I want to know about? A, B, and C. And I'll be more than happy to set up a Zoom meeting and discuss it with you. Okay, so I like this definition, and I want to use this definition to begin with. It is a UK-based definition, but its inclusive practices aims to minimize or remove barriers to learning and provide support to facilitate the success of all learners while ensuring that teaching standards are not compromised. So notice they didn't say learning standards, but teaching standards. What we do, we cannot compromise. We don't want students with disabilities, as been done in the past. This is an example that is in the research from our disability history, where there were students with disabilities in the general classroom, and they were treated like they were the class pet. So the teaching standards were not the same. We did not come to that situation educating those students in the same way. So we want to make sure our standards are not compromised. The design and delivery of learning can unintentionally, so we can at times design certain things, or our delivery can unintentionally present a range of barriers to learning or assessment that will affect some learners more than others. And this can result in learners being unfairly disadvantaged. Through inclusive learning and assessment design and delivery, an inclusive environment for learning anticipates the varied need of learners and aims to ensure that all learners have equal access to learning opportunities throughout their education. So you can see what is underlined, what is in red, and what is in blue are the most important emphasis of this definition that I'm sharing with you. So to be inclusive, so what does it mean? Inclusive practice. When we think about inclusive practice feeds into the inclusive environment, we must be versatile and flexible. And I could spend 5 hours talking about that, with the teachers being versatile and flexible. It's sometimes not something that we tend to be. But in order to be inclusive, we have to be versatile and flexible. So keep that in mind. We have to ensure consistency and accessibility for all. And consistency is extremely important. Work collaboratively. There is no way you can have an inclusive environment if we are not inclusive of each other as teachers and working collaboratively with each other. Encouraging personalization and knowing and understanding each person to a degree. There's a saying, when you've met a person with autism, you met a person with autism. That's one person. So I may have autism and Sheila may have autism, but Sheila and me are two different people. So you have to be people first, understand us, that we're different people. We both may have autism. We have students who are living in poverty, and poverty in one area may not look like poverty in another area. Poverty in Nevada might not look like poverty in New York City. So we do try to do strategies for these broad stroke type of things, but we have to just remember and encourage that it is important to know the people that you are doing a service for, and teaching is a service. And so understanding who are these people in front of me, and encourage that. And what do I need to do to help them? It might not be a strategy, cookie cutter strategy in a book, but it might be something that I just really know how to do because I know this person. In my class, in my gym class, coaches are pretty good at that. Like, I know this kid and I know how to push them because this is what they need, right? So encourage personalization. Varied learning opportunities. We have to learn how to teach things in different ways or provide different learning opportunities for the students. Embracing embracing equality, diversity, and inclusion. Inclusive practices also involves an understanding of the following terms. So if you understand the following terms, give yourself a high five. If you do not understand the following terms, then make a check and note of it that you need to circle in and focus in on those things. So do you have an essential understanding of and check yourself on how you feel about those with different religious beliefs or none, those with special educational needs, those with disabilities, those who are disadvantaged, those with different learning styles, those who have different abilities. So example, and I'm not going to give too many examples because then this might be a very long video, but I've worked with students who were twice gifted, learning disabled, and gifted, high IQ. I've worked with students who were gifted and had OCD. So every single thing I did was under a microscope. And every mistake I made was pointed out to me by the student. I've worked with students who are oppositionally defiant. So if I say the sky is blue today, no, it is not. The sky cannot be blue. That's really not blue, you know, it's an illusion. So there is a range of students, a range of religions and abilities. And these are all the things that we need to check in with ourselves, that we understand that inclusive means that we all are a part, we all belong. A person who believes in inclusive practices or adheres to them is anti-discriminatory, embraces multiculturalism, diversity, disability, and those who are disadvantaged. So basically, when we talk about inclusion and inclusive practices, it's about a place, environment, classroom in which everyone belongs. And so I'm going to look at belongs as a word and stay on it as an acronym. So be. I want to tell you a little short story, which you've probably heard before. It's sort of like a urban legend parable, modern day parable. So there was this lady, and she was going on a trip, and she's going to the airport, and of course she was late. And I shouldn't say of course she was late because she was female, but she happened to be female and she happened to be late. So she was late and she's rushing to get on the plane, and she's carrying her carry-on luggage. She has her pocketbook, and then she has this other carry-on piece of luggage. And so she rushes onto the plane. But before she rushes onto the plane, she stops at a kiosk and she buys one of these bags of cookies, and she grabs it and she throws it into her purse. And so she runs. She gets to the gate. She gets in, she's on the plane, she takes her pocketbook and her carry-on luggage and everything, she throws it up to the top, closes it, sits down, and she takes the bag of cookies from the seat and she begins eating her bag of cookies. So she's on the aisle, and next to her is the window seat, and there's a gentleman who is already sitting there. So when she sits down and she opens up her bag of cookies, she takes out the first cookie and she starts to eat it. The gentleman sitting next to her puts his hand in her bag and he takes out one of the cookies and he starts to eat it. And so at first, the woman is a little perplexed as to what just happened, but she decides not to say anything, and she's starting to get a little heated. She takes a cookie out and he sticks his hand in and he takes a cookie out. And she's getting really angry. So this goes on and on and on. This woman is angry, taking out the cookie, while the man next to her is looking at her smiling, and he's taking out a cookie each time. And so when they get down to the last cookie, he sticks his hand in the bag first, pulls it out, breaks it in half, gives her one piece, and he eats the other, all while smiling. And she is just so absolutely angry about this whole situation, but she doesn't know. He could be like, a crazy person, a weirdo. She doesn't say anything. And so she doesn't say anything the whole time. She's mad, she's angry, pissed off. She gets off the plane. When she gets off the plane, she's pissed off at everybody. She's mad about the situation. So before she gets off, of course, she opens up the top. She gets her bag, her pocketbook, and she gets her luggage, throws it on her bag, throws it on her shoulder. She runs out. And then when she gets in the airport area, she's digging in her bag now because she's looking for her phone. And she's looking for her phone to call a cab. And she's still angry. So when she goes in her pocketbook, guess what she finds? She finds the bag of cookies that she bought from the kiosk. That same bag of cookies. So the cookies that she sat down and pulled out of the seat were not her cookies. They belonged to the gentleman that was sitting by the window, who smiled the whole time while she was eating his cookies. She was mad the whole time, angry, not willing to share, and angry because she thought that he was eating her cookies. So how does this connect with belong? Well, let's look at the first B. And B stands for how will you be given any situation? How are you going to show up? How do you show up in a situation? And so from what we've learned about from this course and from our reading, all of you shared about your experiences of teachers who were unintentionally uninviting, intentionally uninviting, intentionally inviting, and unintentionally inviting. I hope I said it correctly in the correct order. So I'm going to read it again. Intentionally uninviting, unintentionally uninviting, intentionally inviting, and unintentionally inviting. How do you show up? How are you going to show up? Matter of fact, how do you plan to show up? Now that you have this language and you've seen this and you read about it, how will you show up when you go to school in September? And how will you sustain throughout the whole school year? So it's that every day of how am I going to show up? And I shared with a lot of you that a lot of new teachers tend to be unintentionally inviting. And so how do we move from that to being intentionally inviting? And so this is not fixed, and we're not always in one particular box with this, right? There's a range of what we do, and we're human. But being intentional and thinking about it every day. When I worked with some students, a particular group of students in one class that I had, every day had to be a new day, every single day. And every single day when I went to school and I had that period where I knew they were coming in, I had them 2 periods a day. And every day had to be a new day. Because if every day was not a new day, let's just say there would have been some problems, big problems. The behavior that was a part of the disability and being a new teacher and not being consistent and not offering them the consistency that I needed because I didn't have the tools yet. My tools weren't as sharp as they are now. Certain things were very, very problematic and very challenging. But the one thing I did know every single day after, a couple of months, I realized every single day I have to be intentionally inviting, and I have to do it every day. And what happened yesterday was yesterday. Clean slate, new day. And that got me through the year. And not only did it get me through the year, it really did impact my classroom and impact my students. And it was the one thing that I always believed in, no matter what. And I used to tell the students is that your job as a student does not define who you are as a person. So that if you can't read and you're having a difficult time, that doesn't mean you're a bad person. And students do get that message unintentionally by us. And so my students who were failures at learning how to read and now are in the 8th grade and have been told unintentionally that it has to be you. It's you. You can't read because of you, not because of anything else. And so now they had to figure out how to be good at other things that were not academic. And they also had a lot of anger and a lot of learned helplessness. And also being adolescent and trying to figure out their identity of who they were. So it was a lot of things going on. And so my commitment was not to leave them each day feeling that they were broken, because they're not broken. And a disability doesn't make you a broken person that we need to fix your disability. What we need to do is we need to work with you so that you can figure out your personal best and how do we help you understand and grow each day, because you are a person that needs to grow each day. So how will you show up? That's the beat. I want to show you a short video. So I'm going to stop share. And while I'm going through it, we're moving on to the next letter, E, in belong. So what is APB? Do you know what that is? Think about what it is. So as I'm doing it, you're thinking, okay. As I am going through this, you are thinking, oh, okay, I can see that. Let's try this. You're thinking, what is APD? What is APD? Okay, what is APD? We're thinking. What is APD? We're thinking. Okay, all right, you're still thinking. What is APD? And APD is auditory processing disorder. So please watch this with me. It's very enlightening. Some of you have watched it if you took the assessment course with me. So let's take a look at it.
On your desk, you should have shapes and a grid. We're going to play a game now with shapes and colors. When we're done, we'll all have formed a secret picture. Make sure you listen to my instructions or your picture won't look like it's supposed to. Are we doing art? No, Freddie. Our class was yesterday. Here we go. Look at the blue triangle on the grid. Put the green circle on it. Which circle? Don't want the red square on the yellow triangle. But I already knew my yellow triangle. Arthur, the green triangle on the red triangle. Smith had to go in where the yellow line. Arthur had to go to the nurse's. Hey, everyone needs to settle down and pay attention, or no one's going to get this right. Somebody go square with the red circle. Put the blue triangle on the top below the green square. You can see. Put the red triangle, the yellow twice. Put the yellow circle on the last empty space.
Oh my God! I'm only supposed to have one empty space though. Holy crap! I've only heard 2 instructions. Oh my God, it's so bad. Wonder how good mine's gonna look.
Does yours look like this?
Oh my goodness.
So what
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's really annoying, and I have a really hard difficulty like with that kind of stuff when I'm in a restaurant. It's a noisy restaurant, and there's conversation going around. I'm trying to focus on one person's conversation. It's really difficult for me to do. And this one was, that was really hard. Filter it out. Oh my gosh.
Does yours look like this?
No, it does not. I did get one shape right.
So how did that make you feel after doing that?
Man, made me feel frustrated.
One's gonna get this right. Who cares? Everything else square with the red circle. Put the blue triangle on the spot below the green square you can see.
Wait,
Put the red triangle over the yellow shape. Put the yellow circle on the last empty space. Everyone done?
no,
Flip your cards over.
that sucked.
Flip it over.
How do I flip the card over?
Does yours look like this?
No.
So how does that make you feel?
Very frustrated. Very frustrated. And it was like I wanna like keep up with what she's saying, but then I like also am hearing what everyone else is saying and like wanting to listen to them too.
Okay, so let's come out of this. And let me just go back. Okay, I'm going to press new share to make sure you're seeing what I'm saying. Just to make sure. Okay, so what is APD? So you know that is auditory processing disorder or deficit, as it may be said in some other circles. And so what you just saw was an experiment. So it was mostly all of those people were typical, except for the one guy who was explaining his how it is when he's in restaurants. So you have a group of typical people who went into a lab, and so they're given directions to do something that is extremely easy and extremely simple. But then they get a moment in that lab situation where they're hearing all of this noise and they're experiencing what it is like to be a person with auditory processing disorder. And so that leads us to the E, which is so important in inclusive practices, is empathy. You cannot be inclusive if you have no empathy. And empathy is the action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experience of another, of either the past or present, without having the feelings, thoughts, and experience. So you don't know what it's like to have auditory processing disorder, but in your, whether your lesson plans, your when you're about to do differentiate, when you're making modifications, when you're thinking about what to do for these students, if you don't have empathy, everything that you've done is not going to work. It's not going to work. It's not going to help. You're just not going to help. And unfortunately, in our lesson plans, or when we talk about differentiation of instruction or anything like that, or inclusive practices, there should be an empathy section that we speak to, and we usually don't, because it's, I guess, understood that you're just supposed to naturally know that, and that's not always understood. So you must have empathy, and this is why we in education spend so much time on that. So you've taken classes on the 13 categories of disability if you were in special education, which all of you who are here probably took that course. You learn about students You have the cultural diversity course, which New York State says that every student must have a cultural diversity course. They must have a course in students with disabilities to expose you, but E is not for exposure. That's not good enough. E is for empathy. And so that's where you need to think about that. And I'm pointing that out because I have seen time and time again, teachers do differentiation. I'm doing this for this. There is no empathy. You cannot go where the student is. So sympathy is when you look at a kid and say, it sucks that you're homeless. It really does. So this is what we're gonna do, right? So there's a lot of sympathy going on in certain schools. But empathy is where you're listening and you're like, I'm not homeless, but I'm hearing from you and I'm trying to understand and I'm trying to feel what you're feeling. Kid comes in, had no breakfast. Last night was cold. He was sleeping in his car. And when he comes in, no breakfast or anything, and does the first assignment and the head is on the table. And the student is like, I can't this morning. Head's on the table. And as a teacher, oh no, pick your head up. Pick your head up. You need to stand up. We're doing a pledge. I understand that you had a rough night, but I understand that you've had these challenges, but I understand that this is difficult for you, but that's from maybe sympathy or maybe not. Exposure, empathy. Empathy is what we need to be able to really help students. And it's a foundational piece that we need to have. So just like you saw in this experiment, how just for the couple of minutes that the typical person experienced that, how they were frustrated. That's just a couple of minutes. Think of the high schooler who is dealing with a disability or who is living in poverty or who is dealing with systemic racism and they see it. They've been seeing it since elementary school. They get it. And so frustration after 3 minutes of an experiment, think about all of that collateral, all of that frustration. One person is living in chronic frustration. So that's important. And then when we lead with empathy and we think about empathy, it will definitely, I believe, make us more effective. Okay, next. Okay, so, and when empathy grows, we have something L. L stands for love. And a lot of you are going to say, oh, love is, oh, it's mushy gushy. What is she talking about, love? And love has actually been an idea, a researchable point from very long ago in educational pedagogy, starting with Pablo Freire, who brought it out in some of his work. So radical love is love amplified. It's love with a double shot of social justice. Pablo Freire's vision of radical love is one that is never about absolute conscious or unconditional acceptance or unnecessary words of sweetness. That's not what he's talking about. And for some of you, Pablo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, was an education researcher, philosopher, who brought about some important ideas and discoveries. And he is a prominent educational theorist that is quite well noted in the educational field. Okay. So that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is love that is rooted in commitment, willingness to struggle persistently with purpose, to be forceful, inspiring, challenging, and insist and insistent. When we live radical love, we embody this definition. When we teach with radical love, we embody this definition too. In Teachers as Cultural Workers, published in 2005, Freire gave us 7 indispensable qualities that teachers who embody radical love should possess. So let's take a look at this. So these are the 7. Humility, the understanding that we all know some things and we are all ignorant of some things. This allows us to listen and learn just as we speak and teach. Embracing a democratic instead of an authoritarian classroom. So remember that question I asked you about bullying in the classroom? See how it connects? And so, although that's a very small piece of what's going on in this particular part, it's so important that we have humility. Lovingness. Great teachers love what they do, even in the face of struggle and injustice. Being willing to fight for what is right by one's students. Devotion. You know something that's not right. And so armed love, like really knowing like, I have to fight for my students. I have to help them. I have to do what I gotta do. And I see that in so many places with so many teachers. And so when teachers really talk about how they love what they do and they love their students, they love them with an armed love where they're like really helping them. Courage, facing and overcoming one's fears both in the classroom and beyond. The willingness to stand against unjust power. Tolerance, decisiveness, tension between patience and impatience. So when we look at that in turn, this calls us to build and sustain our classrooms on a kind of radical love that encompasses tenets of critical community building, dialogic space, and critical reflective practice. So we have that, and then look at the joy of living, giving oneself fully to life and teaching. And so some of the questions that we ask when we are looking at radical love to like reflect. Choosing radical love requires commitment to new ways of thinking and challenging the status quo, that status quo. These things require risk-taking. So how much am I invested in the well-being of the whole? What does building a critical community mean for me? And what will this look like in my classroom? How will I foster a dialogic space that privileges minority voices? Where does critical reflective practice come into play for me and my students? And how do I incorporate this throughout my life and work? Radical love means leaning into vulnerability and struggle, solidarity and liberation, and organization and action. And as we radically love, and we use that as a means, we also radically love ourselves, right? So what will I do for self-care? So this work is hard, and you need to take care of yourself while you are doing it. So how do you take care of yourself and the whole self? Beyond this professional development, but there's self-care of the mind, the body, the spirit, the heart. And so all of those things are important when we look at radical love. Bell Hooks, another education theorist, philosopher, important person. If you've never read her work, please take a look at some of her stuff. And she said, love is a combination of care, commitment, knowledge, responsibility, respect, and trust. And if you look at restorative justice practices and some of the things that we read, it comes through that when you're setting up your classroom or when you're thinking about leaning into restorative practices as a philosophy for how you then choose to move forward, you are making a commitment. You're getting to know about your craft and know about the students, and you're creating a space where there's respect and there's trust. So all of these things kind of really blend into one another. So the next one, the O. The O is the one story. I'm going to tell you a very short story that I often open with or tell to students who are in one of my courses, which is teaching social studies in the elementary classroom. So as you may have guessed, I teach courses from undergrad to the doctoral level. So this particular short story, I'm gonna keep it really short. I just want you to listen to this. So Bobby and Vanessa are siblings. And Bobby and Vanessa go with their parents on a worldwide extravaganza where they're traveling from first state to state in America, and then they explore Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, and they even get to Antarctica. And Iceland is the pinnacle of the trip. And so they're taking all these pictures and they have these great stories. So when they get back, Bobby and Vanessa's parents invite over a couple of friends because they've been telling them about this fantastic trip that they went on. So Bobby and Vanessa's parents print out the pictures, and they create a book that has all of the pictures. So they're sitting at the dining room table with their friends, and they're talking about this fantastic trip. So Bobby and Vanessa are at the table, the parents are at the table, and a group of family and friends are at this big, huge table. And Vanessa's parents start to talk about the trip. And so on the first page, when they're talking about, oh, so this is where we left, and we started off in Arizona, and then we went to Colorado, and then we went to California. And so as they started off, they picked pictures that they liked, that they thought were great. So after the first 20 pictures that featured Vanessa, oh, here's Vanessa on a rock. Oh, look at Vanessa, isn't she cute here? She's wearing this beautiful dress in the backdrop of the Bay Area. Did you see her bathing suit? Oh, did you? And they just kept talking on and on and on and on about Vanessa. So Bobby's sitting there and he's sort of like, okay, something ain't right here. And so the parents keep going on, and they're like, oh, look, here's pictures of us. And so he peeked a little bit and he was like, oh, that's interesting. And then, bang, after the 40th picture, there was 2 pictures of Bobby. And Bobby was like, wow, look, there's me, there's me, there's me. And so he was a little bit interested. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's me. I remember that picture. Oh, I remember that picture in Italy. Yeah, that was me. Oh, yeah, I remember that picture. Oh, that was me when we went to Egypt and I saw the pyramids. Oh, that's great. And so then after picture 42, back to Vanessa. And every picture, they sat there for hours. And while they sat there, now they're on picture 100. And Bobby is extremely uninterested. And not only is he uninterested, he's angry because he's like, damn, we only got 2 pictures. Why is everything about Vanessa? And they're going on and on and on. He's playing at the table and he's playing with the fork. And his mother's like, Bobby, stop it. Stop making noise. Don't you see I'm trying to talk about the pictures? Bobby gets up from the table and he's trying to leave. And his father's like, Bobby, no, come back and sit down. Come back and sit down. So Bobby's like, do I really have to sit down? Do I really have to be there? Can I just go? No, get back in. You have to sit down. You have to sit down. We're talking about the pictures. Come on, it's great. It's wonderful. It's good for you. Don't you love it? It's wonderful. And so Bobby really doesn't want. He's so uninterested and he's disengaged. Remember that, how disengaged he is. And so he gets up finally and he leaves. But in order to leave, he has to leave in a huff. He has to basically fight his way from the table. And so his parents like, we don't know why he's so aggressive. What's wrong with him? We don't know why he's even acting like that. It's despicable. We're so sorry that he's acting like that. It's terrible. And the whole time, Vanessa is just smiling. She has all the privilege in the world because it's all about her. So you know where I'm going with this. Some of you might be saying, I know where she's going with this. So where are we going with the one story? And I just said, I told social studies students this and open it up with this. Think about it. Think about if you were in school and the story, everything you're learning about is not about you. And you know you're in the room, whether it be you're disabled. We're not learning anything about disabled people in social studies or anything of that nature. Okay, so I'm disabled and I'm African American. I know that there's African American people in this country and around the world. And I got 2, like Bobby got 2 pictures. So I get 2 pictures. I get one picture of Martin Luther King and then one of slavery. That's all you got for me? Why do we expect kids to be interested in what we're talking about when we know that we're not talking about anything that has to do with them? I'm indigenous and I'm sitting in elementary social studies class. And you're talking about the historical in 4th grade. You're talking about historical Iroquois. You're talking about tribes from history and what they looked like back in the day. But I'm indigenous and I grew up on a reservation right now, right here. We got issues going on. I live in Long Island. You know, there's a reservation right here on Long Island in the East End. And I'm sitting in elementary social studies and the curriculum in New York State talks about communities long ago. So you're talking about something that does not even reflect on me because I'm not even part of that tribe. So what does it have to do with anything? When school becomes all about one story, or when you look at the world through one lens and one perspective, that is where you need to take caution and pause and think, am I just telling one story? When you look at the curriculum, when you look at what you're doing, is it just one story? I think with the climate of the world today, we have gotten that message of making sure that we look at things from different angles. There have been events, things that have happened, and because of technology, we get to see another story. So there's a story of what He said, she said, the other person said, and here we have a camera that's sort of showing another view. So we need to look at things from different perspectives. And in order to look at things from different perspectives, we should be bringing those perspectives into the teaching environment. So the multiculturalism, diversity, all of these things that we say we embrace, and then we are in a classroom, and for some reason, all that goes out the window and everything is one story all the time, every day, except for what, once a year, twice a year, Hispanic Heritage Month, Asian Heritage Month, maybe not. Maybe, do we even know anything about the beautiful diversity historically and current that is in our communities with our students? Do we know their stories? Do we know stories that are important and impactful that we should bring in and we should share with them? If you don't know it as a teacher, and we do not want to compromise our teaching standards, then we go out and we seek that knowledge and we look for that so that we can make sure that we are not the victims of just the one story. So I just wanted to share this with you. Some of the recent books that I've read that I think are phenomenal and give you a lot of information, but in a very readable, they're just well written. If you've never read Stamped, Racism, Anti-Racism, and You, read it. It's such a good book. You will thoroughly enjoy it. Braiding Sweetgrass, phenomenal book. Please, when you get a chance, if you do, read it, or you can download it as an audiobook and listen to it. It's great. Teaching with Poverty in Mind, What Being Poor Does to Kids' Brains. That is a really good book. And there's a piece of that we've done in this course. So there's so many different perspectives and ways of looking at things that's important. So these are just 3 suggestions that I am giving to you because it's quite eye-opening when you see something from a different perspective. It really enhances what you do and really makes builds your foundation so that what you then do become really inclusive. So the N, needs. So if you look at this particular slide, you see what? Pieces of a lesson plan. And one of the things that really, really works in it to make a classroom inclusive is in your lesson, if you use a lesson plan and you have the basics. I have observed teachers in a classroom lose students because the lesson that they were doing had some great points, but there was no lesson plan at all. And the students were lost. I was lost. And so some teachers are chronically teach in a way where there are transitions and pieces where kids get lost. And so those holes become consistent holes. And then we get behavior problems, we get all kinds of things that grow out of that. And so we need to understand the needs of the students, but also the needs in that teaching event. And what needs do the kids needs and what needs do I need as a teacher to make sure I get them from A to Z in that lesson. And so there's some basics. And this is seasoned teachers, you probably already mastered this. Before starting off, there's just some basics that that we need to make sure that we revisit, and we want to make sure that in our lesson plan we have not just an aim. An aim is nice to put on the board, or the learning target is nice to put on the board, because a lot of times principals ask us to do that, but you need to really know the objective of the lesson. What is the performance product and the criteria that you're looking for this student to have been able to achieve this particular lesson? And you have to have a procedure in your mind. This is what we're doing first. This is what the students are going to do. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I expect them to do by here. Your motivation, how you open up the lesson. And as you're transitioning from, if you guys are adolescents, so I won't talk about the elementary part, but when the students come in your room, you got 43 minutes. What is the motivation? What are you going to do that is going to start off that lesson, that's going to set the tone, that's going to get me engaged into what's happening? And at the end, okay, and then you have your strategy, but at the end of that 43 minutes, a closure. What were we talking about? What did we learn? What did we do? What's coming up next? I observed in a school, and a science teacher, living environment, and he was, I was observing him and a group of teachers in a research project that I was doing on inclusive settings. And this particular teacher had, for living environment, and he taught, co-teacher, students with disabilities, gifted students, all kinds of students, but specifically students with disabilities. He had 98% passing rate on living environment. And these are students who socioeconomic, not at the high end at all, really middle class, working class. Some students were homeless, some students in poverty. And the school was primarily what people would call minority, primarily Latino, African-American, Afro-Caribbean, and some Asian, but mostly South Asian by way of the Caribbean. So it was a very, very, very diverse school. And he was getting 98, 99% pass rate, first time living environment. And when I say pass rate, I don't mean 55. The students were getting like 70s, 80s, students with disabilities. It was really amazing. And so when I watched him teach, he didn't do a whole bunch of what we call differentiation that you would expect to see. But in each of his lessons, it just, as you sat there, the motivation, as soon as you walked into the classroom, his motivation captured your attention. All the students were captivated. And his lesson always started off with something, had nothing to do with science per se. But so, for example, in one lesson, he was talking about phones. So everybody has a cell phone. And so you have a cell phone, but let's look at a picture of a really old phone. And he went from an old phone to a cell phone and how it had evolved over generations. And so using that to then capture the students, to say, okay, we're going to start talking about the concept of evolution and adaptation, and how human beings and organisms have changed over time. It was phenomenal. And the whole time that I was in that class, I wish I had him as a teacher in teaching living environment. He was inspiring. He was organized. He was consistent. He moved about the class. He used a little bit of technology, but he was just, the lesson made sense every single time. The developmental procedure, you could see how from the concepts hinged one upon the other, and there was always a closure. And it was the best 43 minutes of teaching I've experienced. and I was observing for quite a long time. So N, needs. And when we look at needs, there's a plethora of technology that can help us, such as Goldbook, which we'll learn about in another course, so I won't talk about it. And also our technology courses that we have in. There's so much out there that can help us with our lesson planning and how to have student goals attached to what we're doing and figure out how we can, in our classroom, help students when we're looking at specific IEP goals. And G. So the first, I'm going two different ways with G. So lastly, I just want to say, bring the magic. This teacher that I just talked about, one of the things that he also would do during labs is he loved to play the guitar. So during the labs, he would encourage the students all to meet a certain criteria. And when they met that criteria or did well, or just in general, sometimes he would walk around the class and play the guitar and sing to them while they were doing the labs. And the rapport, the engagement, the interest, it was all there. And so I just want to say that when we really kind of tap into the magic, we can get kids to buy what we're selling, right? So if you're not interested or you're not excited about what you're doing, sometimes they're not going to buy it. So let's start off on that foot. We want students to invest, and in order to invest, it really needs to be sort of like a reciprocal relationship where I'll invest in what? I'll invest in you if you invest in me, right? So that's really sort of the idea of building the rapport and why it's important. And so we've read about that in our readings for this course. And magic can be achieved in talk. And so I just encourage you to find your magic. Be a student of it and find your stride. Each of you has something that is so fantastic that you can bring into the teaching act and that you can share with students. And so it's a matter of you finding it. So I want to show you this clip of magic that is by a professor, Edming from Teachers College. And he gives some suggestions. Now, I don't necessarily expect you to follow his suggestion and follow your magic find your magic or something in the Black church or the barbershop. But listen closely to what he is saying, because I think there's a lot of pearls of wisdom in that. So I'm going to that's not yet. I am going to, let's see. I'm going to go to that clip. Let's see. Here we go. Just bear with me. Okay. Let's see. This is not what I wanted. Hold on. I'm almost there. Should be right up here. I have the header where it keeps saying stop the share, and I can't see. Okay, I couldn't see the headers at the top. Okay, so let me just make sure that you are looking at what I'm looking at. Okay, just double checking. So just watch this. This is very interesting. Food for thought. Again, some of the things that he says here may or may not resonate with you, but just give it a thought and think about where are places where you can find magic and how will you create magic, your own magic in your classroom.
Right now, there is an aspiring teacher who is working on a 60-page paper based on some age-old education theory developed by some dead education professor, wondering to herself what this task that she's engaging in has to do with what she wants to do with her life, which is be an educator, change lives, and spark magic. Right now, there is an aspiring teacher in a graduate school of education who's watching a professor babble on and on about engagement in the most disengaging way possible. Right now, there's a first-year teacher at home who is pouring through lesson plans, trying to make sense of standards, who's trying to make sense of how to grade students appropriately, while at the same time saying to herself over and over again, don't smile till November, because that's what she was taught in her teacher education program. Right now, there is a student who is coming up with a way to convince his mom or dad that he's very, very sick and can't make it to school tomorrow. On the other hand, right now, there are amazing educators that are sharing information that's shared in such a beautiful way that the students are sitting at the edge of their seats just waiting for a bead of sweat to drop off the face of this person so they can soak up all that knowledge. Right now, there is also a person who has an entire audience wrapped in attention. A person that's weaving a powerful narrative about a world that the people who are listening have never imagined or seen before. But if they close their eyes tightly enough, they can envision that world because the storytelling is so compelling. Right now, there's a person who can tell an audience to put their hands up in the air and they will stay there till he says, put them down. Right now. So people will then say, well, Chris, you described a guy who's going through some awful training, but you're also describing these powerful educators. You're thinking about the world of education or urban education in particular. These guys will probably cancel each other out and then we'll be okay. The reality is the folks I described as the master teachers, the master narrative builders, the master storytellers are far removed from classrooms. The folks who know the skills about how to teach and engage an audience don't even know what teacher certification means. They may not even have the degrees to be able to have anything to call an education. And that to me is sad. It's sad because the people who I described that were very disinterested in the learning process want to be effective teachers, but they have no models. I'm going to paraphrase Mark Twain. Mark Twain says that proper preparation or teaching is so powerful that it can turn bad morals to good. It can turn awful practices into powerful ones. It can change men and transform them into angels. The folks who I described earlier got proper preparation and teaching, not in any college or university, but by virtue of just being in the same spaces of those who engage. Guess where those places are? Barbershops, rap concerts, and most importantly, in the Black church. And I've been framing this idea called Pentecostal pedagogy. Who here has been to a Black church? Got a couple of hands. You go to a Black church, that preacher starts off and he realizes that he has to engage the audience. So he starts off with this sort of wordplay in the beginning oftentimes. And then he takes a pause and he says, oh my gosh, they're not quite paying attention. So he says, can I get an amen? So can I get an amen? And all of a sudden, everybody's reawoken. That preacher bangs on the pulpit for attention. He drops his voice at a very, very low volume and he wants people to key into him. And those things are the skills that we need for the most engaging teachers. So why does teacher education only give you theory and tell you about standards and tell you about all these things that have nothing to do with the basic skill, that magic that you need to engage an audience, to engage a student? So I make the argument that we reframe teacher education. That we could focus on content, and that's fine. And we can focus on theories, and that's fine. But content and theories with the absence of the magic of teaching and learning means nothing. Now, people oftentimes say, well, magic is just magic. You know, there are teachers who, despite all their challenges, who have those skills, get into those schools, and they're able to engage an audience And the administrator walks by and says, wow, he's so good. I wish all my teachers could be that good. And when they try to describe what that is, they just say he has that magic. But I'm here to tell you that magic can be taught. Magic can be taught. Magic can be taught. Now, how do you teach it? You teach it by allowing people to go into those spaces where the magic is happening. If you want to be an aspiring teacher in urban education, you got to leave the confines of that university and go into the hood. You got to go in there and hang out at the barbershop. You got to attend that Black church. And you got to view those folks that have the power to engage and just take notes on what they do. In our teacher education classes in my university, I started a project where every single student that comes in there sits and watches rap concerts. They watch the way that the rappers move and talk with their hands. They study the way that he walks proudly across that stage. They listen to his metaphors and analogies, and they start learning these little things that if they practice enough, becomes the key to magic. They learn that if you just stare at a student and raise your eyebrow about a quarter of an inch, you don't have to say a word because they know that that means that you want more. And if we could transform teacher education to focus on teaching teachers how to create that magic, then we can make dead classes come alive. We can reignite imagination and we can change education. Thank you.
Okay, 1 second. Let me figure out how to turn that off. Hold on. Share screen again. And let's go back here. Okay, hold on, almost there.
Ninjama's nighttime underwear featuring all-night leak protection and odor mask technology.
Okay, hold on. Almost there. Okay. New share. Okay, so please be thinking about what you just watched. Okay. So that clip, very short. Every time I watch it, it inspires me because it just, to me, speaks on a truth about engagement that you see it. There are spaces where people are highly engaged. And if there are ways that we can watch that and learn that and use that as part of our strategies and our teaching arsenal, we really would be so much more effective. Really recruiting student interest, and recruiting student interest is a very academic term that is used across in our special education pedagogy. And so simply here, Dr. Edmond from Teachers College, Columbia University, is calling it magic. And how do we find that magic and then pick and choose and try to use it for yourself? So the best teachers are the teachers who borrow, and teachers know how to borrow some good ideas. And so borrow some good ideas and turn it and make it into your own. How does it work for you? So the last G is for gratitude. And so I am very grateful that I had a chance to spend this hour and 14 minutes sharing these ideas with you. Also as a G, I think that if gratitude as a strategy of self-care might be something that really helps you. So when we talked about self-care, Studies show that gratitude can affect our well-being, finding one thing to be grateful for each day, one thing to be grateful for each period and how things went, something to be grateful every day. And people who find gratitude become more optimistic, better mood, and I'm sure leads to a higher level of self-care than those who do not practice gratitude. So the practice of gratitude is very wide, from gratitude journals, which is one strategy, or to just spending a few minutes to remember to engage in that practice. So I hope that all things that we discussed today was beneficial, helpful, maybe some new ideas, maybe some confirmation of old ones. And I'm leaving this with an extra credit assignment for you. And so for extra credit, there will be a extra credit space in the modules. And what I would like for you to do in that space is, after viewing this presentation, if you could just give me a note, or it'll be a text box, where you can just share some of your thoughts with me. So it won't be a discussion board, so it won't be something that everyone sees. So it really will be just you responding to me, and just let me know one thing that you may have found helpful about this presentation, or one thing that you found helpful or that stood out to you from this course that you really feel that you would use, that or use as a strategy that could be with students, or a strategy that helps you think about or think through things in a particular way. I have a lot more information that I would like to share and put in the modules, but sometimes when you put too much and you do too much, students tend to just skim everything. And they don't really pace themselves to really engage and focus. So my strategy is to give you a little less, so that hopefully you'll be more inclined to do that than if I posted, 10 long, lengthy book chapters or something like that, or a textbook type chapters that talk about, say, adolescent development and things of that nature. I find that students tend to sometimes skim that because it's a lot, and especially for this course, which I'm discourse, or courses that are presented in the summer. So this presentation may be put into a fall or spring section, but right now I'm doing this in the summer, and I'm really speaking to students who are taking this as a summer course. So please just share one thing from this presentation or course that you found helpful. If you want to jot any other notes, if you have a reflection that stood out for you, that would be great too. So it's just a very general note that you're sending to me in just what your thoughts are. So I know the directions to that was a little loose, but it's almost, what I'm asking is, usually after I do a presentation like this, students have a comment. As soon as it's over, they'll say, oh, this part made me think about this, or, Professor Chamblin, next time when you do this, could you do this, or could you add that? Or, what really stood out to me about this class was, so those comments, I don't get a chance to hear those comments because we're asynchronous. So if you could leave me a comment, if this was a real commercial, was doing something, I would say, hit the like button and share, but we're not. Yeah, hit the like button and share. So tell me what you liked and share a thought. I like that. That's the directions. Tell me what you like and share your thoughts about it. Okay? So thank you so much for participating in this course. And I look forward to future participation if I see you in another course. And so I just wish you a great summer, a great academic year, and go forth and do good. And that ends our presentation. Okay.